So more on this assisted dying mess in Canada. The provincial government is saying that they want to allow hospitals to opt out at the bureaucratic level. And pretty much everybody is saying that that's no good. I don't agree with it myself either. Healthcare shouldn't be seen as a market transaction, which is the basis of this decision, but as a right. So denying access to services would fall under the denial of a right. You have to remember again that the Liberals in Canada are Liberals, which means that they read a lot of nonsense like Rawls, right? Rawls is considered a liberal. I think Rawls is just disingenuous. I mean, this is a party that was led by Michael Ignatieff at one point, right? This is this is technical liberalism, right? Hayek would have called himself a liberal, right? So their concept of rights, in an academic liberal sense, are going to be not seen well by a lot of the people in the country at a lot of times. And in fact, our Supreme Court is more libertarian than liberal. So our Supreme Court tends not to fall into these, modern liberal conceptions and falls more into what we would consider as modern libertarian ideas, right? And they wouldn't. Our Supreme Court is not going to buy this conscience rights argument. It's going to say you've got a right to. They don't want to balance rights or pit rights against each other or have one right as more powerful than the other, right? And that's essentially what the government is saying here. They're saying that okay, your conscience rights are more powerful. You have conscience rights that's absolute. Our courts won't take that argument. Which is not to say the doctor should be forced to carry out the procedure either. Exactly, right? They have every right to quit and protest. But for a doctor to deny access to the service, conscience rights are not rights. They're the absence of rights. The idea of a conscience right is incoherent. To say that I have the right to deny you of a right is not. It's a mockery of the concept of a right, and you see it come out on the right? The truth is that the argument that the Liberals are presenting here is something that you would be more likely to see from like a Wild Rose Party. It's in Canada, it's considered very right wing to argue for conscience rights, and it's disappointing. But that said. I realize that my opinions and the opinions that you're seeing come out in print are not entirely in line with Canadian jurisprudence either. Canadian law is going to look at what I'm saying and say, okay, you're right, but you're not being very reasonable. Right? And so the law would suggest that in order to uphold the person's right to have access to the service, you don't need to force people to make the choice to administer or quit. Although, I think, if you're not going to do your job, you can go home. I would hold to it out of principle, right? They would say that, okay, so long as there's somebody around that's willing to perform the procedure, then, why are you forcing this person to do it when the person beside them will do it? It's unreasonable, right? What the government's going to look at are things like reasonable access. If you have, let's say for example, you have somebody in a rural area, there's only one doctor for a 400-mile radius, and that doctor won't do it, the court will say that doctor has to do it. Because in order for the person to get access, that's the only option that they have. And they'll say that if you won't do it, then get out of here. We'll put somebody else in this ship that will, right? So it's a balancing act. The court isn't going to take a really strict position from either perspective, so much as it's going to ensure that the access to the service exists. And if the government wants to set up laws that restrict access, then the court will tear the laws down. However it is that it wants to do this, it'll give them a lot of space to let doctors make choices. But at the end of the day, the patient has to be able to it has to gain access, right? So if you're in a big metropolitan area like Toronto, you can find someone. Everybody knows you can find someone. There's no use in forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do when you can find someone that'll do it out of their own free will, right? But if you're in the Northwest Territories, they'll take a different position. We're talking about Ontario, so contextually, if you're in Attawapiskat, then yeah, they'll force you to do it. And I think they should too. But the court's also going to want to avoid that, right? It's going to want to avoid those kinds of rulings. It's a last case scenario. It would be more likely to argue that you need to break up the situation that's led to this scenario, or the state needs to bring in more people, etc., than to actually force somebody to do something they don't want to do, right? And I mean, really, that's what the problem would be, right? Somewhere like, we don't even have to talk about Attawapiskat, we talk about Thunder Bay, right? If you can't find a doctor willing to, carry out a euthanasia in Thunder Bay, our court system is going to say, okay, well, the state needs to ensure that service is available there. It's not going to force you to do it exactly, but it will, force the government to go out and make sure that access to the services is available. And if the only way to do that is to force someone to do it, then the order will come. So I'm going to plead guilty to being hard-headed, but the law is not going to follow me in my rigidity to patient rights and, frankly, my outright rejection of the entire concept of conscience rights as incoherent. Okay, but the law may argue that allowing hospitals to opt out altogether is not the proper balance, and that's what I'm trying to get across. I think what everybody is trying to get across is that you can't let the hospital make the decision. The way the dust settles with this is going to have to be that the hospitals are going to have a department, right? So a hospital cannot make a conscience right argument. That is just a bureaucratic decision to deny access. The law will argue that it's needlessly belligerent to force individual doctors to administer, but that the hospitals must nonetheless provide access that they can opt out. So the government is trying to say that the hospitals have the right to opt out. That will not be upheld in the Supreme Court. And the province should realize that and just not bother with a pointless legal battle that they know that they're going to lose. Like I say, conscience rights are something that the right wing invented in order to avoid giving people rights. There's no such thing as a conscience right. A conscience right is just, like I say, something that was just invented whole cloth by a bunch of conservatives that don't want to acknowledge that people have rights. So trans people have rights, for example. So because conservatives don't want to acknowledge that trans people have rights, they make up the idea of a conscience right. And that gives them an excuse to deny trans people of rights. It's a completely disingenuous, again, just totally nihilistic approach to things. Completely immoral. And it has no place really in a serious discourse. So What's the root cause here? What's the actual problem? The actual problem is that we have private hospitals in Ontario. If we had public hospitals, then there wouldn't be money talking here, and this wouldn't happen. Everybody could save their time. But I mean, it's not. I mean, the entire concept of their argument is not. It's not legally valid, right? There's no such thing as a conscience, right? It's a bunch of nonsense.